Hello, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Kerr, back here with Alex Meyer to discuss our predictions for this year's Tony Awards. We've already covered the musical category, so now we're about to we already discovered the play categories. I know I've said musical by mistake, but we covered the play categories already. Now we're about to discuss the musical categories. So there's about a few more categories than the plays on the play side. So we're about to talk about them. So now, was it you? Oh no, who just read the last category on the play side? The nominees on the play side, was it you or me?
You.
Okay, so this time I'll let you start by reading off the nominees for Best Musical.
All right, and the nominees are The Band's Visit, Frozen, Mean Girls, and SpongeBob SquarePants.
Okay, so, and this is my second super bet I have, that in a season that consisted of only 7 new musicals, most of them were commodity shows, yet the one apple in a bag of oranges, or vice versa, is looking to win big on Tony night, and that would be The Band's Visit. I just can't see anything beating it in the most acclaimed musical at this point, as its fellow competitors each has their share of detractors.
If there's anything that could possibly upset The Band's Visit, I think at this point it's what we would have thought last year would have been the most unlikely contender to do so, and that's SpongeBob SquarePants, because I remember when they announced that this musical was in development and would aim for Broadway, the reaction was just pure outrage.
Well, yeah, I was one of those people who cringed at the idea, as well as Musical Theater Master did a video on it. And I
Oh my
agree.
God, he was furious at the idea of it. But then he went and saw it, and he said it was surprisingly good, or okay, at least in his words.
Yeah, he saw it when I was out of town in Chicago, and
Right.
yeah, and I agree. I think SpongeBob is probably the one show I could see beating The Band's Visit, given all the acclaim the show has received for its innovative staging, especially after everyone cringed when they first heard the idea of a SpongeBob musical. And in fact, not to mention that a win for them here would hopefully send a message to every single corporate company that wants to tackle Broadway to take more creative risks.
Right, because from all I've heard about the show, this isn't necessarily like a recreation of SpongeBob's most iconic episodes, but rather like its own like original story, but with all the characters, and not just like the main characters like SpongeBob and Patrick and Squidward and Sandy and Mr. Krabs, but even like the minor characters too, like Plankton and his computer wife Karen are in the
Mm-hmm.
show.
Well, yes, and also the designs aren't literal, which they're more suggestive than literal. So they're not like these mascot costumes or trying to make them look like trying to make Ethan Slater look like SpongeBob exactly. No,
Mhm.
they literally reconceived the designs just for the stage. Though then again, SpongeBob hasn't been doing great at the box office, despite tying with Mean Girls for the most nominations. And as we've seen in the past, Tony voters don't like to waste any major awards on a show that's been struggling.
Mm. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like, say, they'd produce a show-stopping number on the telecast that could lead to an increase in ticket sales, because
Well, yes,
the Tonys, more than any other award show, are a big marketing ploy, especially. And I could see with summer on the horizon and kids being out of school, I could see how they'll try to use the Tonys as a way to encourage whole families to come to New York to see it, especially if the kids are young enough and actually watch SpongeBob on Nickelodeon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yes, and I was about to point out. Well, yes, in fact, I did see at least they'll at least be doing Gavin Lee's big number "I'm Not a Loser," which is Squidward. They're at least performing down to Tony's, which is a big tap number. So I don't know if that's part of a medley or the only number they're doing, but yeah, hopefully they'll at least put on a good enough performance to keep business afloat for a while. In fact, this is probably one Tony here where a lot of young kids are going to be interested, because not only SpongeBob, also Mean Girls, Frozen, and Harry Potter on the play side.
Mm-hmm. And then and then I guess I have Mean Girls in third place, because I admittedly kind of feel that the idea of a Mean Girls musical isn't really necessary, because the film itself is already iconic enough, and my belief is if it's already iconic enough, why redo anything about it?
Well,
You
it's
know,
better than actually remaking it.
right. I mean, even because I know Tina Fey herself wrote the book for the show, so she was very much involved with this, but it's like, it's kind of like the whole idea of them wanting to make a movie version of Sunset Boulevard the musical with Glenn Close when you already have the iconic black and white film version with Gloria Swanson and William
Well,
Holden, which is a masterpiece, and nothing
well,
else is going to be able to live up to it. So why
Well,
bother?
yeah, though they did do well, they did sort of do that with the producers, where the producers was originally classic comedy starring Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder, and was kind of the big break for Mel Brooks, who won the Oscar for original screenplay the year it came out, which earned him the O in his EGOT. And then when he did the musical, which of course still holds the record for the most Tonys in history, it then went and then was turned into a movie which didn't really succeed well. It wasn't well. It got mixed reviews and flopped at the box office, so that's probably not a good example, but still.
Well, in the case of the producers, you had a 33-year gap between the original movie and when it premiered on Broadway, whereas Mean Girls, it's only 14.
Well, yes, and with Sunset Boulevard, it's like 100 compared to those.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and plus, I mean, pretty much the thing you hear about both Mean Girls and Frozen, it's pretty much the movie verbatim, but with like some maybe updates and stuff. Like with Frozen, it's pretty much the same story, but just a lot more songs to pad out the runtime.
And a little more storyline, as we've seen with other Disney films adapted to the stage, like Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Tarzan, Little Mermaid, Mary Poppins, Newsies, and Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and those are my exact rankings. Yeah, SpongeBob in second, Mean Girls in third, and Frozen in fourth. Given that, well, that very much underperformed in nominations, only got three overall, not even an acting nomination, because every single Disney musical prior to this, well, that earned Best Musical nominations, also got acting nominations, which was not the case this time.
Yeah.
So now on to a Best Revival of a Musical, and the nominees are Carousel, My Fair Lady, and Once on This Island. And so, according to the New York Times order poll, which I mentioned out earlier, that this year surveyed about 110 out of 842 voters, and according to that poll, this category seems pretty competitive. I mean, My Fair Lady narrowly leads the race with Once on This Island closest behind, as well as a good bit of support for Carousel, despite the detractors that production has. And okay, so I currently have My Fair Lady winning because the momentum seems to have been shifting more towards it in recent weeks. And it will also be helped by the Me Too movement, as director Bartlett Shear's vision for the production makes the show less about a man making a woman and more about a woman finding her true strength and confidence. And while my second place choice, Once on This Island, it does still seem to have a shot at winning, I think it's kind of been losing momentum in recent weeks, so it's hard for me to tell how well it could do on Tony Night at this point. And despite the 8 nominations it received, there aren't really many opportunities to award it elsewhere. In fact, I mentioned this in the forums late last night, that it should be interesting to see what other awards both shows could potentially win as part of their whole, because I mean, Once on the Island has a shun in design categories, but they're pretty competitive, so those aren't sure things. And with its lead actress, which we'll get to soon, not out front, she'll have to settle on being a bridesmaid, and then there's the director, which we'll get to soon, and third place, Carousel. Well, okay, and now it may have received the most nominations of these 3 nominees overall, which would be 11, but Jack O'Brien wasn't nominated for directing, so that could be a strike against it. And you have to go all the way back to 2005 when the Jerry Zaks production of La Cage aux Folles, which was before the most recent one with Kelsey Grammer, won Best Revival of a Musical without a directing nomination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are my exact same rankings as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, this is probably the most competitive out of each of the 4 big production categories, so we shall see. Now, on to a lead actor in a musical, and Alex, the nominees are?
Lead actor, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, here we are. So the nominees are Harry Haddon Payton, My Fair Lady, Joshua Henry, Carousel, Tony Shalhoub, The Band's Visit, and Ethan Slater, SpongeBob SquarePants.
And this is another competitive category. Like, you could almost make a case for each of these nominees. Though I currently have Tony Shalhoub winning because even though he may have a very small singing parts in the band's visit, he is the veteran actor out of all the nominees with what is supposedly was supposed to be an emotionally affecting role. Plus, the awards for Best Musical and Lead Actor have so far gone hand in hand about 5 times before within this past decade, with Once, Kinky Boots, Fun Home, Hamilton, and Dear Evan Hansen last year.
And then the rest of your rankings.
Well, second place, I have Ethan Slater for SpongeBob because while he may be the breakout star of the season with his energetic performance in that, I do wonder if he might suffer from the fact that he's playing a cartoon character. I mean, even though James Monroe Eichelhardt's one featured actor a few years ago as the genie in Aladdin, well, still, he had, well, for one, the Sony voters usually like to go for the bigger performance in the featured acting categories. And not only that, but James Monroe Eichelhardt was taking on such an iconic cartoon character that was voiced by Robin Williams, yet reinvented it, making it his own. And I'm not sure if Slater has as much of an argument because from what I've been hearing, he's been more, well, mimicking, well, obviously not copying what Tom Kenny has done with the role over the years, but still kind of mimicking how SpongeBob is in the cartoon.
And then your last two rankings?
Well, third place, I have Harry Haddon Payton. I think he could be a dark horse for My Fair Lady. I mean, he makes the iconic role of Henry Higgins his own, which, of course, has previously won Rex Harrison both a Tony and an Oscar. And not to mention, when I saw he had been cast as Henry Higgins, I was like, well, for one, I wasn't too familiar with him, even though I have watched The Crown, and I didn't realize he had a recurring role on it. But still, he seemed younger than usual Henry Higgins, which was actually Bart's idea from, I guess, day one, because he actually wanted Henry Higgins and Eliza Doolittle a little more close, equal in age for his production, as opposed to the large age gap as with the original production, where 20-year-old Julie Andrews was playing opposite then 48-year-old Rex Harrison. And then when the film version, Rex Harrison was in his mid-50s, playing opposite then early 30-year-old, and Audrey Hepburn, who was in her early 30s.
I think she was more like mid-30s because she was like 35 at the time.
Well, or 34 when they filmed it, but yeah, that seems about right. And in fourth place, Joshua Henry, who, while he did appear to have his share of support in the Tony voter poll for Carousel, he may be hurt by how controversial his character Billy Bigelow is, given how he's physically abusive of his wife.
Yeah, I actually have Ethan Slater in first place. I just feel that, I don't know, something in me is saying that because of the physicality he brings to the role, Tony voters might be impressed and have kind of like a how the hell does he do that all the time feeling.
Because
we've seen people win for playing very physical roles that require a lot of stamina, and you're wondering how the hell do they do that. I'd be like exhausted doing that just once. Like you had the 3 Billy Elliot boys win for, you know, their work, and you had Billy Porter in Kinky Boots, and he's having to wear those high heels.
And you had Norbert's Leo Butts in Catch Me If You Can with his big show-stopping number, Don't Break the Rules.
Well, I've never seen the stage version of Catch Me If You Can.
Well, still, but I did see it, but of course I don't remember if Carl Hanratty in the musical was very physical beyond that number, but Neil Patrick Harris as Hedwig.
Yes, I was just about to bring him up. I mean, he's in high heels and he has to wear the fishnet stockings and the wig and everything. And I remember he would like post pictures of like his injuries that he would sustain on stage from the role.
And you're like, plus, damn. And not to mention, he was on stage in that show the entire time. So that's, again, that was such a juggernaut, meal of a role.
Right.
And
then John Cameron Mitchell, after playing the role in his 30s off Broadway, returned to Broadway in his 50s to do it. And it's like, and I think he admitted like he needed to have like a lot of surgery or something as a result of the role in the past.
Well, yeah, I believe he even had an injury in the middle of his run. That's so Michael C.
Mm.
Hall had to fill in.
Oh yeah. So, but I do have Tony Shalhoub in second place. One of the reasons why I think he might not win is because he did have to leave the production earlier this year to film season 2 of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, on which he's one of the major stars. So if not enough voters saw him, I could
Well,
see them.
even though he did return for select performances during Tony season.
Right, but still, that only limits Tony voters a small amount of time to actually see him. So if they didn't see him, they're obviously not going to vote for him. But then I was struggling whether or not to put him in third or fourth, but I ultimately put Joshua Henry in third because there does seem to be some support for him, and with some people predicting him to win and some saying he delivers a great performance of some of the show's most iconic songs. But
well, yeah, he even has like a nearly 7-minute number near the end of Act 1 called Soliloquy.
But I do ultimately think, despite what despite what Broadway etc. thinks, I do think the Me Too movement will hurt Joshua Henry here, because you know obviously Carousel has been nominated and won in the past in various revivals, but we've never seen the character of Billy Bigelow be nominated until now. But in the wake of the Me Too movement, with where you have a domestic abuser literally get a chance of redemption even after death, some voters may feel that, especially if they themselves might have been physically abused by a spouse or a parent or whatever, they might feel that that's like a slap in the face in terms of like morality. And they might be the type of people who will feel that no abuser should ever get a chance of redemption, even in death.
Yeah, that's a good point. And in fact, I was about to point out that actually the only prior Broadway production of Carousel that earned, well, actually there were 2 that earned Tony nominations, but only the last revival from 1994 actually won. It won all 5 categories it was up for: revival of musical, direction for Nicholas Heitner, choreography, which was a posthumous win for Kenneth McMillan, set design for Bob Crowley, as well as featured actress, which was the very first win for Audra McDonald.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Harry Haddon Payton in last place, just because I haven't really seen any indication that he has a chance of winning.
That's a good point. I mean, in fact, when the New York Times voter poll covered this category, he was the only one who was not mentioned. So, with them mentioning that Tony Shalhoub leads this close race, at least has me comfortable enough and keep sticking with him.
Right. I imagine it'll be a close race between Slater and Shalhoub, but of course, I'm trying to keep in mind that just because it's the Tony voters poll doesn't automatically mean that they'll win, because we all thought Tom Hanks would win for Lucky Guy based on the Tony voter poll, as well as Laura Osnes for Cinderella, but both of them lost to Tracy Letts for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Patina Miller for Pippin.
In fact, and it's ironic how Tracy Letts and Tom Hanks later played opposite each other in the post.
Right. But then, Tracy Letts win was very surprising to me, at least when I was watching, because I assumed based on
based on when I was winning, or if not Hanks, it would be Nathan Lane for the Nance.
Right. I mean, I assumed that Nathan Lane had the best chance of an upset, and although with Patina Miller, I did think she had a fair chance to upset Laura Osnes. Because I remember thinking I didn't know who between the 2 of them was win. It seemed like it was a very 50-50 chance for both of them that year.
Well, yes. In fact, I should point out that Paul Sheehan of Gold Derby has talked about this a lot, because he was in the press room at the Tonys that year, and when Tracy Letts walked in after winning, the first thing he did was he called out everyone. Well, the experts by name. Well, he called out by name the experts at Gold Derby who did not predict he was going to win. He was there standing there like, David Sherwood, you didn't predict me. Brian Lipton, you didn't predict me. So it's just a sign of how much these people are paying. Well, how much sometimes nominees, or at least their agents, are paying attention to what their odds are like going in.
Yeah, so
Yeah, and of course, I should mention that. Well, yes, just the Tony Voter poll. Well, this year only surveyed about 15% of the voting bloc, so we don't know if it's as close of a race among the entire voting bloc, but we shall see.
mhm.
Yes. Now, on to lead actress in a musical. The nominees are Lauren Ambrose, My Fair Lady; Haley Kilgore, Once on This Island; LaChance, Summer, the Donna Summer musical; Katrina Lenk, The Band's Visit; Taylor Louderman, Mean Girls; and Jessie Mueller, Carousel. So, for a while, Katrina Lenk appeared to be the frontrunner in this category for her understated yet unique performance as the charismatic cafe owner Dina in The Band's Visit. And according to the recent Tony voter poll, she's still holding on to that status. Not to mention that she also has the narrative of being that working actress who's been in New York for a while, paid her dues, and is now finally getting her big moment in the spotlight.
And I could definitely see how, if any voters felt she was snubbed last year for Indecent, because I know a lot of people were predicting her to at least get nominated, and she wasn't.
Even
This
I was
create
one. Even I was one of those
this
people.
th- if voters who are upset about her getting snubbed for that, they could definitely feel that this is a way to make it up to her.
Well, yeah, and that's another factor that her star from Indecent last season has also played a big part into her breakout, I guess, a couple of years now.
Hmm. Plus, I know she has some very, well, I guess you can't call them show-stopping numbers because The Band's Visit isn't like a showstopper musical, but
Well,
she
yeah,
does
it's a
have
more
like
of an understated
she,
musical.
she does have like some standout numbers. Like I saw her perform the song Omar Sharif at the Drama Desk Awards last year,
Yes, I remember that.
and it was a very beautiful song. She has a very beautiful voice.
Mm-hmm. Every
Her voice kind of reminds me of singers like kind of like Sarah McLachlan and Bjork.
mm,
She kind of
yeah,
has she
you
has
can, maybe she could play those characters if they ever do a biomusicals or biographical films on those singers.
yeah, that would actually be a great thing. I could actually see. I could actually totally see Katrina Lenk recording an album entirely of Sarah McLachlan covers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as for the rest of my rankings, I have Lauren Ambrose in second place because, I mean, for My Fair Lady, because she came in at the last minute, surprising everyone with her performance as Eliza Doolittle in Lincoln Center's production, especially after many thought she seemed like a very odd choice for the role at first. And third place, I have Haley Kilgore because I think, if Ambrose and Lang end up canceling each other out, I could see Kilgore possibly sneaking in and take it for Once on This Island, as she is a newcomer to the boards and is the central lead of a show that has always been identified as an ensemble piece. And fourth place, I have Taylor Louderman for Mean Girls, and fifth place, Jessie Mueller for Carousel, and sixth place, LaChance, the original Timon and Once on This Island, for Summer, the Donna Summer musical.
I have the same top three, and in most cases, I probably would have ranked Taylor Louderman in fourth and Jessie Mueller in fifth. However, based on her very surprise win at the drama desks, I ended up moving Jessie Mueller to fourth place because it indicates that the industry is paying attention to her performance, even if many people feel that she's not getting the chance to really showcase her talents. Because I know a lot of people say it looks like it's a wasted role for her, but obviously some people in the industry seem to disagree there. And Taylor Louderman hasn't really won anything for Mean Girls. I mean, none of the
Well,
cast
nothing
has.
major.
So
Nothing major. She's won a Broadway.com Audience Choice Awards, but that's been it.
right, but of course that's entirely because the Broadway.com Audience Choice Awards, it's Broadway's equivalent of the MTV Movie and TV Awards or People's Choice
And
Awards,
the Kids' Choice
where
Awards.
where popularity doesn't kind of factors in more than actual talent. But not saying Taylor Louderman's not talented. Don't get me that wrong there if anyone's watching. Um, but yeah, because of her drama desk win, I moved Jessie Mueller up to fourth place, put Taylor Louderman in fifth, and then LaChance in sixth.
Well, I should point out that, yes, Jessie Miller's win at the drama desk was surprising, but it's also worth noting that she and LaChance were the only Tony nominees in this category that were nominated there.
Right, but I guess that could be just due to the fact that maybe voters at the drama desk are more aware of them because they've been around longer.
Well, yeah. The Drama Desk has done a lot of strange things over the years, and they couldn't nominate Lauren Ambrose, and they couldn't nominate Haley Kilgore, and they couldn't nominate. Well, Katrina Lenk was already in content. Well, I don't remember if she was nominated for the band's visit at the Drama Desk last year, but I know she was already in contention for it last year when it was off Broadway.
Mm-hmm. And
And
don't the drama desk isn't the drama desk nominating committee only like 10 people, whereas with the Tonys it's like 40 to 50?
yeah, I believe so. And of course, as we also keep pointing out, that the Drama Desk and Our Critic Circle and Drama League don't overlap with the Tonys. They're their own separate groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes it very interesting with some of these results.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like with the Outer Critics Circle Awards, they were like went completely gaga for like American Psycho and Tuck Everlasting in 2016, and
At least with
virtually no
nominations.
other. Right, and they only got like a small handful of nominations at all the other shows.
Well, yeah, Tuck Everlasting only got one nomination for costume design, and American Psycho only got nominations for lighting and set design.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention, Anastasia last year got a bunch of Outer Critics Circle nominations, but only got two Tony nominations for Mary Beth Peil and featured actress and costume design.
Mm-hmm.
So, now, are you ready to discuss featured actor in a musical?
Yep, just let me flip to the page here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the nominees for featured actor are Norbert Leo Butz, My Fair Lady, Alexander Gemignani, Carousel, Gray Henson, Mean Girls, Gavin Lee, SpongeBob SquarePants. Hey, Catherine McPhee, take notes. I pronounced it correctly.
Especially if she ends up introducing Frozen. In that case, at least do better than John Travolta.
Well, and then Ariel Stachel, I hope that's pronounced correctly.
I think you got it right. I think you got that right. Yeah, so with both Ambrose and Haddon Payton not appearing to be frontrunners in their respective categories, according to the Tony voter poll, Norbert Leo Butz now appears to be My Fair Lady's best shot at an acting prize for his performance as Alfred P. Doolittle. In fact, if he were to win here, it would be the first time that character actually won and featured, as I believe it was George Rose, or I believe that was his name, who won as lead for Revival in the 70s. So that really had been a question of billing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It seems like a feature role to me, especially from the movie version.
Well, yeah, where Stanley Holloway earned an Oscar nomination as a supporting actor, as well as a Tony nomination for the original production as featured.
Right. Oh, we forgot to mention with Lauren Ambrose, we forgot to mention that she's the very first Eliza Doolittle since Julie Andrews, the original Eliza, to get a Tony nomination for the role.
Well, yeah, and yes, which we've of course discussed that previously, how that role has had interesting awards history, where Julie Andrews, who's didn't well, of course, Julie Andrews was nominated, the only Eliza before Ambrose to have been nominated, and though Andrews lost the Tony to Judy Holliday for Bells Are Ringing, and of course, Audrey Hepburn was famously snubbed for an Oscar nomination for the film version, while Julie Andrews ironically ended up winning for Mary Poppins.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've noticed that, like with the Oscars, with these musical nominations, if you're not, a lot of times, if you had your voice dubbed by someone, you often either don't get nominated, or if you do get nominated, you lose.
Well, yes, though a lot of the singing West Side Story was dubbed, and Rita Moreno only got her real singing was only used in America, and she still ended up winning supporting actress that year.
Mm-hmm. But that's like the rarity, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Plus, that film did very well in Oscar night, so that might have been part of its sweep.
Yeah.
So, in any case, are you ready to get back to this category?
Yeah.
Okay, and over the years, Norbert Leo Butz has proven to be quite a triple threat on the boards, with his performances in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Catch Me If You Can, and now My Fair Lady. Norbert Leo Butz is pretty much the king of show-stopping production numbers. I mean, in fact, when I saw he'd been cast, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I never even thought that. This role seems perfect for him. And in fact, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the cast album, which was released digitally yesterday, but if you at least get to Get Me to the Church on Time, I mean, I'm not too familiar with My Fair Lady. I've read the book to the musical. I've seen the film, but I've never actually seen a stage production. But I'm aware that for this production, they did something new with Get Me to the Church on Time just for him. So yeah, I do have him out front, though. But then again, Gavin Lee also has a big show-stopping production number in SpongeBob SquarePants, or even manages to pull it off with 4 legs, almost likewise for Grey Henson Mean Girls, only with 2 legs and the role of a gay character. Though my second place choice is actually Ariel Stachel, because I think if you were to pull an upset here, it would definitely be a sign of how strong the band's visit is. I mean, he may not be the showiest of the nominees, but then again, that could probably help, as he is probably the one apple in a bag of oranges, or vice versa. As his performance is probably unlike the other nominees, but then again, Tony voters usually go for the bigger performance in the featured categories. So yeah, I have Norbert out front with Ariel in second, Gavin Lee in third, Grey Henson in fourth, and Alexander Geminiani in fifth. I think with Geminiani, his nomination is the award, and from what I've been hearing, people were especially surprised by his nomination, because those who had seen the revival of Carousel, who had been familiar with it before, they cut like half or at least parts of his character's material.
So for me, I have Norbert Leo Butz in first place as well, but I actually have Gavin Lee in second place because, you know, I've heard all about his show-stopping number, and
which we will get to see on the Tonys.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I think, you know, whether Squidward is kind of the character in SpongeBob who I think most people could relate to, because he's like the one sane character or the one smart character. Like, if you watch the show, you always kind of feel bad for him that he always has bad luck happen to him, or that the fact that he has to put up with the idiocy of both SpongeBob and Patrick.
Well, yes, I remember that one episode where SpongeBob and Patrick ended up waking up in medieval times, and they ran to Squidward's ancestor, who then curses himself that my own great-great-great-great-great-grandson be cursed and fold.
And of course, in the iconic Band Geeks episode, Patrick's like, "Is mayonnaise an instrument?" No, Patrick, mayonnaise is not an instrument.
Horseradish ain't an instrument either. And oh yeah, and that episode, SpongeBob also asks, "Is this the part where we start kicking?" And then Squidward says, "No, SpongeBob, that's a chorus line."
Yeah. But then I have Ariel Stachel in third, and then I have the same last two, Grey Henson and Alexander Geminiani.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, and I guess the reason for my 2 rankings, well, again, I could still see Gavin Lee winning. He did win the drama disc, albeit Butts wasn't in contention there, nor was Stachel, since the band's visit was already there last year when it was off Broadway. But then again, according to the New York Times voter poll, which again only surveyed about 15% of the voting bloc, there doesn't seem to be a lot of passion for SpongeBob. And more passion for the band's visit, which is why I'm getting the feeling that if Ariel Stachel wins here, it will definitely be a sign, which is why I have him ranked higher than Lee.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess in my case, the reviews of SpongeBob that I've read, a lot of them highlighted Gavin Lee as the standout and like the best thing about the show.
Well, true. So, again, I'm not saying it's impossible. He could still win. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I end up switching him back to second place before tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Now on to a featured actress in musical. You ready for this?
Yep.
All right. The nominees there are Ariana DeBose, Summer, the Donna Summer musical, Renee Fleming, Carousel, Lindsay Mendez, Carousel, Ashley Park, Mean Girls, and Diana Rigg, My Fair Lady. So while I do have Lindsay Mendez in first place, I think she is out front and more likely to stand out from Carousel than Renee Fleming, even though Fleming does get to sing You'll Never Walk Alone, which is one of the most famous ballads ever written. She did not particularly get great reviews for her overall performance as Nettie Flower, which is what makes her nomination all the more surprising. While Lindsay Mendez, of course, she's in the role that won Audra McDonald her very first Tony for the last revival, and Mendez has been viewed as one of the best aspects of Carousel. And since making her Broadway debut as Jan in the most recent revival of Grease back in 2007, she has climbed the ladder with performances in Everyday Rapture, Godspell, Off Broadway's Dogfights, and Significant Other. And what would make a win for her all the more remarkable is that she wasn't even supposed to be in the production at first. Betsy Wolfe was originally cast as Carrie Pipperidge, but had to drop out, so casting directors came to Mendes for the role. And I was listening to an interview with her on and the Envelope podcast, saying that she literally had to learn how to sing the vocal range of her character because she's normally known as a beltress, while she had to learn how to sing soprano.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. And my second place choice is Ashley Park from Mean Girls, pretty much because she was the only one from that show to have made it into this category. And her star has been on the rise with not only her previous Broadway appearances in revivals of The King and I and Sunday in the Park with George, but also her performance on Off-Broadway's K-pop this past season. And it is also worth noting that every single Best Musical nominee Casey Nicholaw has helmed to date has managed to take home at least one acting prize, like Beth Level in The Drowsy Chaperone, Nikki M. James in The Book of Mormon, James Monroe Eichelhart in Aladdin, and Christian Borle in Something Rotten. So history does seem to be on Park's side, or I guess to some extent Gray Henson's, but yeah, I think Mendes is out front. Third place, I actually have Diana Rigg in third place. I guess again, probably the one apple and a bag of oranges rule, since she of course has only a speaking part in a musical, My Fair Lady. But then again, I guess if done well, it can help because, again, the role earned Gladys Cooper an Oscar nomination for the film version. And I have Renee Fleming in fourth place, pretty much because, well, I don't see Tony voters going for Ariana DeBose in Summer, the Donna Summer musical, who I have in fifth place, given the I guess, the hands that show received. So I think for DeBose, the nomination is the award.
Yeah, I have the same top two. I think Lindsay Mendez is out front, but I could see Ashley Park pulling off an upset if they feel Mean Girls should win at least something. But Mean Girls seems to be the least regarded of Casey Nicholaw's shows so far.
Yeah.
Even if it did get some positive reviews. But I actually have Renee Fleming in third place, mainly because I feel that the fact that she's, even if her acting itself didn't get the best reviews, the fact that she still got raves for her performance of You'll Never Walk Alone could maybe sway some voters there, because she does come from an opera background, and the fact that Diana Rigg doesn't actually sing at all in this category as featured actress in a musical, meaning they probably expect you to do some kind of singing, that could probably hurt her.
And well, yeah, even Tony Shalhoub has more stuff to sing in The Band's Visit than Diana Rigg.
Plus, Diana Rigg already has a Tony, so voters, I think she has a Tony, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah, it's for Medea, which was her last Broadway appearance back in 1994, which ironically was the same season where My Fair Lady was last on Broadway, as well as Carousel. Not to mention the original productions of Angels in America were playing then, and a big Disney hit musical based on a juggernaut of an animated film, Beauty and Beast, lost to a one-act musical adaptation of a foreign film, Passion, which is likely to be the case again this year with Frozen losing to The Band's Visit.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so maybe Tony voters may feel Diana Rigg, since she already has a Tony, doesn't need another one right now.
Well, true. Although you know, this is her first Broadway appearance in like 25 or something years, so I could see probably not a lot, but maybe at least maybe a couple voters shaking off her name just for as a welcome back. But I think probably the nomination is more or less the award.
And then I have Ariana DeBose in last place, just because the musical got horrible reviews from critics who basically said it's nothing more than a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, but hey, the show will at least be fulfilling on Tony, so there's a great consolation prize for her and LaChance.
Mm-hmm.
Now on to Best Direction of a Musical.
Okay, and the nominees are David Cromer, The Band's Visit, Casey Nicholaw, Mean Girls, Bartlett Sher, My Fair Lady, Michael Arden, Once on This Island, and Tina Landau, SpongeBob SquarePants.
Okay, so after having worked off Broadway in regional theaters for so many years, David Cromer is now finally getting his big moment in the spotlight for his staging of The Band's Visit. And given all the enormous love that there is for that show, especially within the Tony Voter poll, I think he seems to be a safe bet to predict. Though I will say, if Michael Arden ends up winning here for his immersive staging of Once on the Sound, I think this is where we could see a surge for that production and musical revival.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
And
and
I do.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, keep going. I was about to comment on my rankings, but I didn't realize you weren't done yet.
Oh, well, but then again, last year marks the first time in over a decade that both the winners in both directing categories were productions that didn't go on to win their top categories. If history repeats itself this year, I mean, Tina A could win for pulling off a Julie Taymor-esque job with SpongeBob SquarePants by creating a purely theatrical world out of an animated property. Though then again, if Arden still wins and Once in the Zion doesn't win Revival, I guess I could see a case being made there too. But my overall rankings are first place David Cromer, second place Michael Arden, third place Tina Landau, fourth place Bartlett Shear, and fifth place Casey Nicola.
Those are the exact same rankings I have.
Mm-hmm. And yes. Yes, in fact, that's something I should have mentioned earlier, but every single Tony winner for Best Revival of a Musical since 2010 has also managed to take at least one major award as part of its whole. And although I could see Once in the Sound winning Revival, nothing else, just like Company and Hair did in the 2000s, but again, with My Fair Lady a little more likely to take a major prize as part of its whole, I could. That's why they do have a winning Revival of Musical right now. But again, if Arden wins director, which is why I have him in second place, I think that's where we could see a surge for Once on this Island.
Yep. And the next up, I believe, is Best Score.
Yes. The nominees there are Angels in America, The Band's Visit, Frozen, Mean Girls, and SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, in each of his three previous outings on Broadway, David Yazbek hasn't had the best of luck standing out from the crowd. I mean, The Full Monty basically suffered from opening the same season as the producers. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels suffered from opening in a very competitive season. And Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown pretty much broke down in New York. But now it looks like The Band's Visit will finally get him to the podium on Tony nights, and I don't really see anyone beating him in this category. I mean, SpongeBob SquarePants may be the second best reviewed new score of the season, but I doubt Tony voters are going to rally around, as it was comprised of songs that were each written by separate recording artists. And I mean, I guess if it were to win, it would be really interesting to see how the winners will go up on stage to accept it. Like, who would get to speak first, or at least at all, because I saw that Cyndi Lauper is going to be there, Steven Tyler, a lot of the score nominees, and of course, one of them being Sarah Bareilles, who's co-hosting, so she'll be backstage she'll probably be backstage when that character is being presented. But
well, the big question is, will that category even be presented on the air or on the commercials?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess a chance for it to be presented on the air could be the fact that a lot of those rock stars who contributed songs to SpongeBob are high profile, and not to mention, and Mean Girls and Frozen are both high profile. Though I have them in bottom two, with Angels in America in third place, because while no play score has ever won this category before, I guess I could see some Sony voters probably marking it down on their ballots as a slap in the face to the lack of new musical scores this season. And fourth place, Frozen, because while the Lopez's may have done a solid job at augmenting their score for Broadway, I mean, out of the 5 previous Disney scores that were nominated in this category, Newsies is the only one to have prevailed to date. And there are two things going for that. One, it was a strange year in that category, as there were only 2 musical scores, that and Bonnie and Clyde, and 2 play scores, Peter and the Starcatcher and One Man, Two Governors. Though there was the case for Newsies in that, while the original movie was a flop, and Alan Menken, and when it was adapted for Broadway, Alan Menken and Jack Feldman not only wrote new songs, but made revisions to the old ones, making, I guess, people thought was much improved from the movie. And for Mean Girls, which I have in last place, I've heard a lot of people expressing that the score is one of the weakest parts of that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have The Band's Visit and SpongeBob in the top 2, but I actually put Frozen in third just because the Lopez's are very well respected, and even if the show itself got mixed reviews, at least a lot of people praised the singing. Like, a lot of people thought Casey Levy's version of Let It Go is pretty good and almost up there with Idina Menzel's from the movie. And
Well,
plus
yes. In
some of the
fact,
new some of the new songs they wrote, especially this one song for Casey Levy, I think it's called Monster.
it is.
That seemed to get a lot of praise.
Hmm. And we should also point out that both of Bobby Lopez's previous Broadway outings, Avenue Q and Book of Mormon, has won him the gold. So that's a good case to be made.
Plus, the Lopez's are still riding the wave of their second Oscar win for "Remember Me" from Coco.
Well, yes, which means Bobby Lopez is now a double EGOTer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a good case. And I guess
And
I'm
then I
sorry.
have, and then I have "Angels in America" in fourth and "Mean Girls" in fifth.
Okay, so now on to best book of a musical.
All right, and the nominees are The Band's Visit, Frozen, Mean Girls, SpongeBob SquarePants.
Okay, so while Tina Fey may have done quite a bit of campaigning for Mean Girls, I mean, I'm not familiar with the original movie, and I obviously haven't seen the Broadway musical, but from what I've been hearing, it sounds like she basically just did a straightforward adaptation of the film where the only major differences are that's been updated to 2018. And in the past, whenever a musical adaptation of a film won this category, it's usually been for a more inventive adaptation, like The Producers, Hairspray, Billy Elliot, and Once. And from what I've been hearing, The Band's Visit seems to fit more into that mold than Mean Girls. And plus, many times before, the awards for book and score have gone hand in hand, especially within the last 3 years. And not to mention, from the New York Times voter poll, there seems to be a backlash against. Well, of course, there's often with industry insiders, there tends to be a bias against commodity musicals, so there doesn't seem to be much passion for Mean Girls in the Tony voter poll and more for The Band's Visit. So I have Itamar Moses winning in first place, Tina Fey in second, given, I guess, the speculation, and third place, SpongeBob SquarePants, because I could see Kyle Jarrow possibly being a dark horse, given how he came on board in the middle of the creative process to write an original story featuring characters from the popular animated series. And fourth place, Jennifer Lee for Frozen.
Yeah, I have the same exact rankings too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now on to best choreography. And okay, let me get there. Yeah, the nominees there are Christopher Catelli, My Fair Lady, Christopher Catelli, SpongeBob SquarePants, Stephen Hoggett, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, Casey Nicola, Mean Girls, and Justin Peck, Carousel. So, one of the most talked about aspects of the current Broadway revival of Carousel has been the new choreography by Justin Peck, who hails from the New York City Opera. No, not New York City Opera, New York City Ballet. And while I do think he's going to win, I do have him in first place, I could maybe still see him being a little vulnerable, given that I've read some complaints from people feeling that the choreography was a little overdone, but again, that probably has the most choreography of this season, given that Carousel has always been a ballet-heavy show. And second place, I actually have Stephen Hoggett for Harry Potter, because with that play looking to win big on the play side, I wonder if Stephen Hoggett could sneak in a win here. I mean, while that play may not have the most obvious choreography, I've read a lot of plays for the movement in it. In third place, I have Casey Nicola for Mean Girls, because he now has 10 Tony nominations overall, and today only one win for co-directing The Book of Mormon, which of course was with Trey Parker's South Park in 2011. And if voters are aware of this track record, I mean, I guess they may feel he's overdue for a win as choreography, especially since there aren't really many opportunities for Mean Girls to actually win anything despite the 12 nominations it received. And fourth place, well, I have Christopher Catelli in fourth and fifth place. Fourth for SpongeBob and fifth for My Fair Lady. I mean, given that he has 2 nominations in this category, he is at risk of vote splitting with himself. And while SpongeBob may be the more dance-heavy show, there's still quite a bit of dance sequences in My Fair Lady, especially with, as I mentioned earlier, how he created a true showstopper out of Get Me to the Church on Time for Norbert's Leo Butts.
Mm-hmm. All right, this might be my biggest disagreement in rankings with you. I still have Carousel in first place.
We can at least agree on that.
But then I have SpongeBob in second place, My Fair Lady in third, Mean Girls in fourth, and Harry Potter in fifth.
Interesting rankings.
With SpongeBob, I put that second just because I've heard about about not only how dance heavy it is, but just a lot of like it's filled with a lot of other different types of choreography, like gymnastics, and like apparently there's skateboarding. So
Mhm.
like I have a feeling if it has the best chance to upset to award not only the dancing but also all the other aspects as well.
That's a good point. I mean, that's why I have SpongeBob ranked higher than My Fair Lady, though. The Though again, according to the Tony voter poll, of course, we don't know if it's like this among the entire voting bloc, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of passion for SpongeBob. Though again, that's a good point you made.
Mm-hmm. But then I have My Fair Lady in third because I just feel that Christopher Gattelli he's already well respected in the industry. And the fact that he's nominated twice this year alone shows me that people do pay attention to his work, and that
Well, yeah, and he is a previous winner for Newsies.
he could be a name check for some voters. They'd see his name, they'll just say, okay. And then Casey Nicola, he has a lot of big show-stopping numbers in his show, and I know Mean Girls has a lot of big dance-heavy numbers to it. And then Harry Potter, I have a feeling just some voters might not feel a show without dancing should win a choreography award, because to many people the word choreography means dancing itself.
Well, yeah, that is true. Although Stephen Hoggett, this is his fourth nomination. He was previously nominated for his work in Once, Rocky, and Curious Incident. So, I mean, some Tony voters may feel he's overdue at this point.
Could be, but I just have a feeling that when people think of Harry Potter, they don't normally think of choreography.
True, although sweep voting has happened in the past.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Mhm.
I just feel that this is the Tom O'Neill rule again. You have to have the more factor, the most dancing, the most like uh what's the word I'm looking for? The most obvious dancing, I guess, or the most amount of dancing, or the
Mhm.
most complex dancing, whatever the voters are looking for. They're looking for something that has the most, I think.
Well, yeah, which might have helped Bandstand win this category last year, despite not getting in for Best Musical.
Right, and I actually had Bandstand. I did rank that first, but then I remember following our Slugfest last year, I then switched to Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, and I was like, don't! When watching the Tonys, because I had a feeling I might be making a big mistake by doing that.
Although I believe I remember you switched to Come From Away at first, but then Great Comet.
I, I might have, I can't remember if I switched to Come From Away. I don't remember, but
Well, because I remember you didn't have Come From Away winning anything, despite being such a strong contender.
right, I just thought that Come From Away was just going to suffer from having to come out at the same time as Dear Evan Hansen. But I do recall. I think you and I disagree 2 years ago of Hamilton versus Shuffle Along.
Oh yes, because I predicted Shuffle Along would take choreography because I mean I was able to see that, and man, Savion Glover's choreography in that was just incredible. I mean, plus of several of us did think it'd be the more obvious choreography, but no, Andy Blankenbuehler managed to win that in a sweep.
Right. But then again, isn't Hamilton pretty much just nonstop singing and dancing, very little dialogue in between?
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know if Tony voters were just thinking of that, or if they were just, it's Hamilton's nominee here. Good, we'll check it off. If that was the case, but yeah, of course, Andy Blankenbuehler managed to become the first person since Susan Stroman to win choreography 2 years in a row last year.
Oh yeah. Um,
But anyway, are you ready to talk about orchestrations?
yep.
Okay, and I believe it's your turn, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. The nominees are The Band's Visit, Carousel, Mean Girls, Once on This Island, and SpongeBob SquarePants.
Okay, so I think in previous years, whatever was winning Best Musical and/or Score would usually pick up orchestration side to its whole, and therefore Jamshid Sharafi would have a great shot at winning here for bringing David Yazbek's score for the band's visit to life. And while I think he could still win, it is worth noting that his category this year, starting this year, will be only be voted on by a peer group, so it should be interesting to see who will end up winning. I currently have Jonathan Tunick winning for Carousel because, well, for one, he's an EGOT legend taking on the beloved Rodgers and Hammerstein score. And to date, the only Tony he's ever managed to win was for Titanic back in 1997, which was also the very first year that this category was established. And some may feel that Tunick is overdue for a second Tony at this point, especially given all the nominations he has received since then.
And then the rest of your rankings?
Well, second place, okay, I had him in first place for a while, but I ended up switching to Jonathan Tunick recently because of the arguments that have been made. And though second place, I have Tom Kay, who is a previous Tony and Pulitzer Prize winner for Next to Normal. He probably had the most difficult job out of all the nominees this past season. He took a bunch of songs that were each written by various recording artists for SpongeBob SquarePants and was apparently able to create a cohesive sound for all of them, blending them seamlessly from one another. So I think he's definitely in the conversation. And I do have Jamshid Sharafi in third place for the band's visit, since, again, it could still win. Though fourth place, I have Anne-Marie Milazzo and Michael Starobin for Once in This Island, given how Starobin collaborated with Milazzo to reconceive his original orchestrations for the production to create a specific sound for the revival. And fifth place, I have John Clancy for Mean Girls.
All right, so I was going back and forth in my head before I picked my rankings because I just wasn't sure. But I ultimately kind of decided to settle on the band's visit just because I believe the actors are playing a lot of the instruments themselves on stage. And
yes, that has helped in the past with shows like, John Doyle's production of Sweeney Todd as well as Once.
But not just that, I also just think the uniqueness of the band's visits music, since it's very Middle Eastern and we don't normally see that on a Broadway stage, there'd be a lot more pressure to get that kind of music portrayed authentically. But I believe David Yazbek, he is of Middle Eastern descent, isn't he?
Let me look that up. I'll see. I imagine at least the orchestrator is.
Yeah, I think David Yazbek in his Drama Desk speech last year, he mentioned something about being Middle Eastern and Jewish at the same time.
Yes, he was. His mother is or was of Jewish and Italian descent, while his father was of Lebanese ancestry.
Okay, yeah. So I just think that kind of, and I've heard excerpts of the band visit score, and it's a very beautiful score, and like it's amazing orchestration, even if it's more subtle than say Carousel, since you're using a lot of big brass instruments there. But I just feel that kind of the intimate feel of the score, and just kind of because it seems like what's the most beautiful sounding music that tends to win this more often than not, and especially if it's like only the orchestrators themselves who are voting this time, they may feel that the smaller show should get the big award. And plus like we've seen before, if like shows that have more of a less of a traditional Broadway score feel to it can still win this, not like we saw with Dear Evan Hansen last year. And
you and I both had split opinions on that category. I predicted Great Comet and you predicted Hello Dolly, and we both got it wrong.
And I believe Jason Robert Brown won this award in 2014 for Bridges in Madison County, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Okay, and I know that's more of like an acoustic folk score, you know?
Well, I might still be predicting Carousel, but I did just move Band's Visit up to second place.
Yeah. But I do have Carousel in second place just based on Jonathan Tunick's name and his win at the Drama Desks.
And our Critic Circle.
Yeah. So I just think in this case he could kind of won there since the band's visit wasn't eligible this year.
Very true, very true. Although I guess again, since this is a peer group voting, I mean they may show the most respect for him.
Right, which is partly why I have him in second place, and I think it'll probably be a close race in the voting.
Yeah.
But I do have SpongeBob in third place, Once on This Island in fourth, and then Mean Girls in fifth. In fact, I remember when the nominations were announced, I'm like, really? Mean Girls for orchestrations? Is there really anything worthy enough to orchestrate in there?
Well. Of course, we don't. Of course, well, this year definitely would have been interesting to see the full rankings and how each production did nominations. Because I probably wouldn't be surprised if Mean Girls actually came fourth or fifth place in some of its nominations.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think Mean Girls had a shot in this category at all, just because the score itself got so much flack for not being good enough. So
Yeah, and I thought, well, especially after they announced this category was going to be 5 nominees instead of 4, I thought, well, I guess maybe Jason Robert Brown for Prince of Broadway, but that didn't happen.
right. I mean, I did think he'd probably get in just because he had to orchestrate so many iconic musical numbers, and plus, he's already won 3 Tonys himself, so obviously voters are aware of him.
Yeah. So now on to the design categories, and I have Sam Ekman's other article where he talks about the design categories on the musical side. So I guess we can start with best scenic design of a musical.
And I believe it's your turn this time to announce the nominees.
Oh, okay, sure. And the nominees are The Band's Visit, Mean Girls, My Fair Lady, Once on This Island, and SpongeBob SquarePants.
All right, and I have a feeling you and I might have split opinions on this. I'm actually going to take a bold chance and say SpongeBob SquarePants will win here.
And
then
that is possible.
And then I have Once on This Island in second place, My Fair Lady in third, The Band's Visit in fourth, and Mean Girls in fifth. And I'm mainly basing my rankings here based on photos I've seen on like Playbill and Broadway.com of the sets.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and in fact, I'm sorry.
And kind of based on Tony trends, like it seems like in the past, the sets that had like the most eye-popping pieces and the most colorful pieces tend to win.
Well,
like we saw 2 years ago, even though Hamilton was virtually sweeping, one of the few categories it lost was this category, which it lost to She Loves Me, and almost every review of She Loves Me praised the set as being like this giant like jewelry box on stage.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes. In fact, I should point out in Sam's article that, well, yes, David Zinn did recently pick up a drama desk for his colorful set of SpongeBob. That built out proscenium elements are the built out. He thought the built out proscenium elements were eye popping and memorable. However, it could easily be overshadowed by work being done on a grander scale. And he said no one did grand this year like Michael Jurgen with My Fair Lady. Sam thought the street scenes showcase brilliant use of forced perspective, and Higgins' massive rotating study provides a moment of awe, and larger-than-life work often prevails here, potentially making Jurgen the one to beat. Not to mention, I have heard that they did build a turntable just for the Beaumont stage at Lincoln Center Theater. So, yeah, I currently have Michael Jurgen winning, though I have Dane Laffrey in second place for Once on This Island. According to Sam's blog, he seems like a possible upset for his inventive use of stage space and found objects in that show. I mean, the design may not scream big, but Laffrey apparently was able to fully transform every inch of the intimate circle in the square, complete with a sand-covered stage and a waterway. And Sam thought it was the most memorable stage environment of the season, making this first-time nominee a major wild card in the race. So, yeah, well, again, maybe not as big, but again, I guess you could also make a case for Scott Pesk in The Band's Visit, but still, it could help be that he's probably the one apple in a bag of oranges or vice versa, because, again, it's so unlike the other nominees. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, first, again, I have Michael Jurgen winning for My Fair Lady. Second place, Dan Laffrey for Once on This Island. Third place, David Zinn for SpongeBob, even though he did win the drama desk. I don't believe Jurgen was in contention there.
I don't remember.
Let me look it up. Third place, Scott Pesk for The Band's Visit, and fifth place, Scott Pesk, Finn Ross, and Aaron Young for Mean Girls.
Yeah. I guess I just have a feeling this year that SpongeBob could be this year's Peter and the Starcatcher,
Hmm,
because
that's a good point.
that cleaned up in the design categories in 2012. Although of course that was on the play side, not the musical.
Yeah, yeah, but that is a good point you made. Which again was also avant-garde theater for a family property.
Hmm.
And yes, I was right that the only fellow Tony nominee David Zinn was up against in this category was Lane Laffrey from Once in the Silence. So My Fair Lady was in contention at the Drama Desk, which not that it means something, since again the Drama Desk don't overlap with the Tonys, but is something worth noting about.
Hmm.
And not to mention, I've heard that they literally decorated the entire Palace Theater, not just the stage, but also the, I guess, theater around it. It's the entire auditorium.
Mm. Well, if that's the case, then that could definitely help because again, this is Tom O'Neill's More rule. I took into account here.
Yeah. So now on to best costume design of a musical. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hold on, let me just get my page here. All right, and the nominees are Carousel, Mean Girls, My Fair Lady, Once on This Island, and SpongeBob SquarePants.
Okay. So now I'd say Catherine Zuber is a safe predict for costume design. I do have her in first place. I mean, and not to mention that, as Sam pointed out in his article, 3 of Zuber's 6 Tony wins came from her work on Lincoln Center Theater's musicals, such as Light in the Piazza, South Pacific, and The King and I. And it seems likely she'll continue that trend by picking up another one for My Fair Lady. And she did just pick up a Drama Desk Award for her efforts. And though same things, her closest competition is Clint Ramos for Once on This Island. Because his use of found materials were inventive and proved essential to selling the musical's conceit of a fable set in a post-disaster Haiti. And it would be an unconventional costume win, since period work tends to hold favor, but Ramos has already pulled off a win for unconventional costumes in Eclipsed. And though my second place ranking is actually David Zinn for SpongeBob, given that he's created colorful clothes, not to mention how he was able to reconceive the designs from the cartoon and not do something literal, but again do something more inventive and be suggestive of to audience members, especially those who are familiar with the anime series. Oh, okay, that's SpongeBob. Okay, that's Patrick. Okay, that's Squidward. No. And I do have him in second place. Though I do have Clint Ramos in third, Greg Barnes in fourth, and Ian Roth in fifth.
And those are my exact same rankings as well. And I remember seeing photos from the production of Carousel. I'm like, these are 19th century costumes? Are you serious?
Well, yeah, Ian Roth's nomination, I was truly stunned by. I mean, I don't know if she actually came.
Because I saw this, I don't know if you thought the same thing as me, but when I saw the photo of Joshua Henry as Billy and the sweater he was wearing, I literally thought to myself, is that a Bill Cosby sweater?
I wonder if that was the approach given Bill Cosby's allegations.
That made me think, are they trying to make Billy look like Bill Cosby here? Is that their direct intention? Or I mean, what is this? I mean, it did not scream 19th century at all.
Well, yeah, I don't know if she got that nomination based on the strength of being Anne Roth. I mean, she has 3 nominations overall this year, 2 on the play side. But I probably wouldn't be surprised if she came in 4th or 5th place in the nomination, especially over Christopher Orum's beautiful-looking work in Frozen.
Right. Yeah, I thought if anything, Frozen would at least pick up a costume or scenic design nomination, even if the production's reviews weren't all that great. I mean, you had to figure. I mean, I've seen like their costumes, and they look like a solid recreation of the costumes from the movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, not to mention Disney has had a pretty good track record with costume design. Like, it was the only award Beauty and the Beast was able to win, and Lion King won costume design. Well, Mary Poppins and Aida. Well, Mary Poppins was nominated for costume design, but it lost to Grey Gardens. But it at least still won set design.
Mm-hmm. And while I haven't watched the episode of Theater Talk yet, where they make their Tony predictions, I wonder if Michael Musto would make that same kind of remark about Joshua Henry's costume if it looked like a Bill Cosby sweater, because that seems like the kind of thing Michael Musto would say.
Rooting for Prince of Broadway all the way. Yeah.
I remember back at the 2011 episode, I'd have to count how many times, but several times I remember he mocked the notorious Kathleen Turner flop High. Because they were saying, well, this didn't get in here, or oh, they're missing Kathleen Turner from High in this category.
The following year he said Bonnie and Clyde, Bonnie and Clyde. Or the following year he said rooting for Scandalous all the way. And when they got to lead actress in musical and noticed Carolee Carmelo was nominated for Scandalous, it's like Michael Riedel was like, "There's Scandalous, Michael. Okay, where's Breakfast at Tiffany's?"
But I remember in Broadway.com when they did their predictions, I remember one of the staff members, he wanted Carolee Carmelo to win for Scandalous just because he felt his literal words were, "This woman has been through the mud with all these shows." He felt she should win a Tony just for the fact that she said to been in so many shows that
and suffered through a notorious flop. So it probably would have been Elizabeth Taylor level for Butterfield 8.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, well, that does make an interesting point. If Carolee Carmelo indeed had a health scare before the Tony ceremony, would that have swayed Tony voters or not?
Who knows?
Would any of the losers have had made a remark like Shirley MacLaine did, where she literally said, "I lost to a tracheotomy"? She was widely expected to win for The Apartment that year.
Yeah, which won Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, now on to Best Lighting Design of a Musical, and is it my turn? I believe.
I think so. Yeah, it is.
Okay, the nominees there.
Oh wait, I don't think I. Oh, never mind. Sorry. I thought about my rankings, and I just realized you and I had the same ones.
Okay, yeah. The nominees for Best Lighting Design of a Musical are The Band's Visit, Carousel, My Fair Lady, Once on This Island, and SpongeBob SquarePants. So, according to Sam Ekman's blog, this seems to be by far the most competitive of any design race this year. He thinks all 5 contenders have a legitimate shot of winning. And I currently have Jules Fisher and Peggy Eisenhower winning for Once on This Island because, well, again, I don't have Once on This Island winning anything else, and it did just win the Drama Desk, so at least has me comfortable in predicting it. And I think, well, this could probably be the one award it'll end up taking home if it doesn't win Best Revival. And he does mention how they were responsible for chaotic storm sequences and a thrilling shadow play. And though at the Drama Desk, the only Broadway show among the nominees in their category is Brian McDevitt for Carousel, who I have in last place. And though second place, I have Kevin Adams for SpongeBob SquarePants, given how he was apparently able to bring the candy-coated cartoon to life. And the lighting in that show, from photos and video I've seen, looked pretty colorful, and it is leading the odds. Though, then again, Sam does make a case for how the other nominees have signature moments created from lighting, and of course, most of the voters have very little experience, at least expertise in this particular craft. And he thinks, Don Holder for My Fair Lady. Sam thought watching the opening street scene Wake Up, and that shows light flows across the stage. He thought that was a gorgeous first impression, and he still couldn't shake Eliza's private moment by the dim study light during I Could Have Danced All Night. Though he's actually currently banking on Tyler Mickaloo for The Man's Visit, given his stunning table looks. Well, the stunning lights for during Omar Sharif, which shows Katrina Link's shadow being cast across the warm-hued set as she becomes lost in memory. And he thought that remained one of the most striking visuals of the season, thanks in large part to the lighting. But yeah, I have Once on This Island in first place, Kevin Adams for SpongeBob in second, Tyler Mickaloo for The Man's Visit in third, Donald Holder for My Fair Lady in fourth, and again, Brian McDevitt for Carousel in fifth.
All right. Yeah, I have Once on This Island in first, SpongeBob second, The Man's Visit third, My Fair Lady fourth, Carousel fifth.
Oh, those are my exact rankings.
Yeah. With Carousel and a lot of the set photos I saw, they looked rather dark. Like you would think, like a show, at least for the first half of it, before it takes its dark turn story wise, would be like all bright and colorful, since you know.
Well, yeah. You know, it almost reminds me of Chris Stuckman's review of Alien vs. Predator Requiem, where he thought it was the darkest movie he'd ever seen. And he doesn't mean thematically, he means literally. Like, it was lit so dark.
Right. Oh, I remember I remember Paul Wantoric when he had Stephen Pasquale on his show a few years ago. I think he asked him about Aliens versus Predator Requiem.
Well, he at least mentioned that in when he was introducing him.
Yeah. uh, all right, and then our last category, I believe, here is sound design.
Yes, and read off the nominees.
And the nominees are The Band's Visit, Carousel, Mean Girls, Once on This Island, and SpongeBob SquarePants.
Now, of course, sound design awards are always tricky to predict given the lack of history and statistics. And to, of course, to make the matters worse, well, only a small panel of experts will vote in the category starting this year. But I have SpongeBob winning because, well, because I know sound is supposed to be very vital to that production. As Sam especially points out in his article, he thought that was the only show with a dedicated Foley artist, in this case Mike Dobson, who was nominated alongside the sound designer Walter Tarbeck. And he felt that the fact that cartoon stomps, squishes, and crashing pratfalls were performed live each night and timed to the motions of the actors, he thought that was impressive enough for the win. Though still, if Tony voters are too in love with The Band's Visit, they could reward the best musical frontrunner here and shun the commercialism of SpongeBob. And though he did say one should never count out a show playing in Circle in the Square, as the unconventional playing space creates a bevy of challenges for the sound designers to overcome. So all hope is not lost for Peter Holinsky for Once on This Island. And so overall, I have Walter Tarbeck and Mike Dobson for SpongeBob in first, Peter Holinsky for Once on This Island in second, Kai Harada for The Band's Visit in third, Brian Ronan for Mean Girls in fourth, and Scott Lehrer for Carousel in fifth.
All right. I have the same top three, but I have Carousel in fourth and Mean Girls in fifth.
I guess makes sense. I mean, again, I guess you can make a case for Scott Lehrer, since I know he's won at least once before for South Pacific 10 years ago, which was the year these sound categories were first established. And of course, a lot of people don't understand what sound design actually is in theater. And I know it involves like the microphones each of the actors wear, as well as making sure they're balanced well with the orchestra, which is especially apparent in musicals. So, and I know Carousel is supposed to have a large orchestra, so I guess I could see a case being made for him here.
Plus, doesn't Carousel have like fight sequences with like punching and stuff like that? You have to, and obviously the actors aren't literally hitting each other, but because that'd be too dangerous. But you'd have to.
Well, yes. In fact, I even remember seeing a behind-the-scenes photo of Wicked in the scene in Act 2 where I believe it was Elphaba or Glinda, one of them slapped the other person in the face, and they didn't actually do it. That was just a sound effect. They do rehearse it every night before the show to make sure they don't actually hit each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But plus, I don't know if we see this on stage, but in Carousel, does Billy actually hit Julie on stage, or is it not shown?
Well, at least in the New York Philharmonic staging, which is available to watch on Amazon Prime with Kelly O'Hara and Jesse Mueller as Carrie Pepperidge, I don't think Billy hitting Julie was actually shown. It was only mentioned.
Mm-hmm. But do we see evidence? Like, does she have a black eye or something, or a bloody lip?
Oh, well, no, I mean, granted, it was a semi-stage concert staging, so it wasn't actually literal, though, spoiler alert, Billy does kill himself.
Right, well, I know that, but...
Well, I meant for the viewers watching this.
Mm-hmm. But isn't it like an accidental suicide, or does he deliberately kill himself?
Let me look it up. I believe...
Because I thought he dies in a fight.
Well, let me look this up. I believe it was at least something tweaked for the 1956 film adaptation, and so let me look. Yeah. In the film, Billy died by accident rather than by suicide, as in the show, because when he falls on his own knife while trying to escape an arrest, in the show, he deliberately stabs himself while standing on the pile of crates, which does not collapse.
Mm. Yeah.
So again, I guess I could see a case being made for that, though again, since it's a peer group, Ryan Ronan has won this category twice before for The Book of Mormon and Beautiful, the Carole King musical, though I'm not sure if he has a shot winning a third this year, but again, this is purely peer group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it'll turn out this time.
Mm-hmm. But hey, at least the sound categories are back after much people were angry about them being eliminated a few years ago.
Oh yeah, I remember casts from various shows had like those little signs that said like hashtag Tony's can you hear me or something like that.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah,
And
so
there was like a massive petition started on change.org but by a Tony winning sound designer.
well,
And there
yeah,
was
I believe I signed it.
yeah, and there was another petition that was sent to the Tony Administration Committee, which was signed by many big luminaries like Stephen Sondheim, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hugh Jackman, Diane Paulus, and many, many more.
Mm-hmm. Well, well, yeah, and again, of course, I guess a reason why it was eliminated in the first place was because there's this whole discussion on if enough people are even aware of what sound design actually is, which is pretty much the reason why now that it's back, it's only being voted on by a peer group.
Mm-hmm. Which makes me wonder how many people are actually voting for it out of all the Tony voters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in any case, we've gone through every single category we did. So now before we leave, I guess I have to ask you, okay, so I guess what are your thoughts going into tomorrow's telecast with Josh Groban and Sarah Bareilles hosting?
Well, admittedly, the thought of them as hosts never once crossed my mind before it was announced.
Yeah, same here.
Because usually Tony hosts have some kind of comedy background. I'm guessing they're trying to bring in more ratings this year after the ratings with Kevin Spacey kind of took a nosedive following, we're not in the Hamilton phase anymore.
Well, yeah, even though Dear Evan Hansen, while it wasn't Hamilton level juggernaut, it was still like it was still becoming like a cultural phenomenon. And
Mm-hmm.
and of course, I'm sure they also like to want hosts to play it safe and not go too political, especially since Kevin Spacey's allegations happens a few months after the last year's Tonys. Obviously, he won't be invited to host anything else ever again, other than viewing parties in rehab.
Although who's to say they won't take a jab at him this time? I imagine they might.
Well, yeah. In fact, I even on my blog, I even wrote an opening monologue, if the Tonys were have one, where I even vaguely mocked Kevin Spacey, who I thought I thought he did a solid job. And no, his allegations does not change how I view his work, because I'm one of those people who separates the arts from the artist. But still, my monologue I had. Well, first, I'd like to give a shout out to he who must not be named, and no, it's not Lord Voldemort. It's actually last year's Tony Award host, who, while he was the 15th choice, he really did put a lot of hard work into the job, though given what's going on in his personal life right now, he's pretty much way down to the bottom of the list indefinitely.
Let's see. I can imagine something going like this. Angels in America is the most Tony nominated play tonight, but there'll be one person who won't be having angels visit him on his deathbed, Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, or Bill Cosby, or Harvey Weinstein, or Louis C.K.
Or I imagine they'll go like this. But they'll probably if they decide to tackle the Me Too movement, they'll probably go, and all the men in the Me Too movement, when you're on your deathbed, you won't be visited by angels. You'll be visited by Roy Cohn.
Well, yeah. In fact, another thing I put in my opening monologue, I said, in fact, we even just got a postcard from in rehab. He said, "Dear Tony Awards, I had such a great time hosting last year. I would love to come back for another round, but given there are parts of me that I just can't control, inappropriate parts of me that I just can't control, or so he says, I'll pretty much be hosting a viewing party this year with my new roommates Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein. So, break a leg to everyone involved. Sincerely, me. P.S. Please say hi to my old friend Anthony Rapp for me.
Or if like the see, or like they could make, if they want to make a jab at Carousel and for how Billy Bigelow is an abusive character, they could say this.
Another thing I added was, so let's spend tonight forgetting all about the Me Too movement and focus more on the nominees for Best Revival Musical. Carousel, which is the story of a man who must redeem himself after beating his wife. Or My Fair Lady, a musical of a man who changes a woman to exactly what he wants her to be.
Right. Or you could say this. Carousel is about, or they could say this. Carousel is now much more controversial than it was 70 years ago because its hero is a man. Is a man who abuses his wife. The only thing that makes Billy Bigelow heroic these days is that he's not a pedophile.
yeah, but again, I guess more on your thoughts on Groban and Bareilles hosting. I guess, what are your expectations going into tomorrow with them?
My guess is they'll focus more on like songs rather than comedy. They'll probably, I'm sure they'll probably do some sort of musical tribute to the nominees or something, or maybe perform like a medley of songs from the nominees.
Well, yeah. In fact, I could imagine Josh Groban performing "Soliloquy" from Carousel or "On the Street Where You Live" from My Fair Lady.
Mm. I'm not really expecting any. I'm not really having any expectations of them as hosts because we've never seen them host anything before.
Well, at least not on this level, because Josh Groban has at least co-hosted with Kelly Ripa a couple of times on her talk show, but that's not really the same thing.
That's a completely different scenario, though.
Yeah, in fact, according to Michael Riedel's column, the Groban and Bareilles are apparently going to be both opening to telecast with a new song tending up the season, and its raft of shows based on movies and cartoons. Cast members from all the nominated musicals will apparently join them.
Mm. Okay, yeah. Well, they usually do that anyway.
Well, yes, yeah. In fact, one of my all-time favorite Tony Awards opening numbers was the 2009, the first year Neil Patrick Harris hosted. Now, he wasn't part of the opening number, but I loved how that opening was a mashup of all the nominated musicals and performances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there was his 2013 opening number, which
will get bigger.
Which must have had like a 2-minute standing ovation at least.
Well, yes, and he even ended saying, "That's our show. Thank you very much. Good night." Yes, and of course, when Zachary Quinto and Andre McDonald came out to present after that, Quinto said, "Well, that's the definition of a tough act to follow."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I'd say they are both interesting choices, and I think they're a more interesting hosting duo than Kristen Chenoweth and Alan Cumming a few years ago, even though I did like their stint as hosts. But yeah, I think this is something that could potentially reach not just Broadway fans of theirs from both the music world and the Broadway world, since they both earned Tony nominations for their Broadway outings, whether it be on stage or behind the scenes. And in fact, it should be interesting to see what the ratings are like, especially not only with them hosting, but also the high-profile productions nominated from Frozen, Harry Potter, Mean Girls, and SpongeBob.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
just wondering who, out of all the presenters, who's more likely to present Best Musical, Cheetah Rivera or Andrew Lloyd Webber, or maybe maybe have them present together.
Well, according to Michael Riedel's column, Bernadette Peters is apparently presenting Best Musical, while Andrew Lloyd Webber and Cheetah Rivera's Lifetime Achievement Tonys will probably are likely going to be presented on the air this year.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It would be. I guess that'd be a nice change because I remember there was a lot of flack in 2015 when Tommy Tune didn't get his Lifetime Achievement on the air.
Yes, and Kristen and Alan both had to settle on a brief tribute to him.
Mm-hmm. Was another, I'm trying to think, there was another Lifetime Achievement Award that I'm sure some people probably would have liked to have seen James Earl Jones' Lifetime Achievement Award be on the air last year.
Well, yes. So, but I was at least glad that when they recapped on the telecast, they at least showed a part where he dedicated to his, at the time, recently deceased wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and though I believe the last time a Lifetime Achievement Award was presented during the Tony telecast was Jerry Herman in 2009.
Mm-hmm. Yep, with his with Mame herself, Angela Lansbury.
Yeah, where, of course, yes, and where, and and I, and I don't know if they felt obliged they had to do that, but then again, I mean, then again, of course, the year before that came Wall-E, which of course utilized clips from the film version of Hello Dolly.
Mm-hmm. And I think the year before that, in 2008, even though he wasn't there in person to accept it,
Stephen
Stephen
Sondheim, yes.
Sondheim, but Mandy Patinkin came out on stage to read like the speech, Stephen Sondheim's thank you speech.
Well, yes, and followed by him introducing the performance from the 2008 revival of Sunday in the Park with George. Oh,
But
oh,
what was hold on? Oh, I was just gonna say this with the Jerry Herman presentation. If B. Arthur hadn't tragically died a few months earlier, I wonder if she would have presented the award with Angela Lansbury.
oh, that would have been a nice reunion, especially with all the reunions we see nowadays at various award shows from the Oscars, Golden Globes, and Emmys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which of course was the reason for me starting a form in a thread in the forum series goes on which former co-stars would you like to see reunite in the Tonys, whether it be from Broadway shows or movie musicals or well,
I came up with two. I
yeah.
came up with Chip Zien and Joanna Gleason from Into the Woods, as well as Danny Burstein and Beth Level from The Drowsy Chaperone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, though. Yeah, so we shall see. But yeah, and I guess my expectations for Grobin Brawls, well, more on them. Well, I guess it should be interesting to see how they'll be used throughout the night.
Yeah. Something tells me they might be more sporadic and they'll probably come back every now and then, but otherwise I have a feeling because they're not used to hosting these kinds of shows, they'll probably be for the opening number and maybe sparingly throughout the rest. I don't think they're going to expect them to be like Neil Patrick Harris or Hugh Jackman or even James Corden.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we shall see. And I guess before we go, okay, well, I guess which performances from the nominated musicals or overall are you most looking forward to seeing?
I haven't really thought about that, to be honest. I guess I'm curious to see what they do with the band's visit. Will Katrina Lenk sing Omar Sharif again, or if they'll do something else?
Oh, well, they could do something different, which is a little duet which she shares with Tony Shalhoub, who that's probably the one song he has throughout the entire show.
Mm-hmm. I've heard about what they're going to do with Once on This Island, which makes it very interesting to see how that'll look on screen.
Well, yeah, especially with how which is a similar thing they did with Great Comet last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was certainly an interesting performance. I mean, first there's Josh Groban sing by himself, and then suddenly the lights go up and there's everyone going,
like,
oh! We're like, whoa.
Well, yeah. In fact, I remember even reading the message boards of Broadway World that said, "Dear Hello Dolly producers, this is how you reconceived your staging for the Tonys," because, of course, there was that whole controversy of how Scott Rudin, refused to have any big production numbers performed for Hello Dolly in the telecast because of how precious he because of the way it was staged at the Schubert Theater. Like during the title number, the ensemble jumped over the edge of the stage, which in the middle is the orchestra pit, while the edge at the stage at the Tonys is much larger. And they, I don't remember if they looked into reconceiving it, but he just didn't think it would look as good if they reconceived it. And he said, no, unless you want waiters falling down into the audience, we're not doing that.
Well, I remember Broadway, etc. They said Scott Rudin should have just should have just gritted his teeth and paid the money to showcase Bette Midler.
Of course, he also offered to have Hello Dolly's performance performed at their theater, but the producers refused, saying, "Look, like every nominee musicals, performing at Radio City. There's no reason for you not to.
And yet a few years ago, they decided to throw in a completely unnecessary segment where we see Hairspray being performed live on a cruise ship when the musical wasn't even playing on Broadway at the time.
Well, yeah, in fact, in Theater Talk's recap show where they talked about Michael Radels doing his impersonation of Harvey Fierstein, I was like, oh, it's the least they could do after, yeah.
I remember, I'll admit, the very first time I ever heard Harvey Fierstein's voice, it was at the 2009 Tony Awards. I literally thought he had been, I mean, I had no idea who Harvey Fierstein was at the time, but I literally thought, okay, this guy must have had his voice, his larynx removed because he must have been a heavy smoker. Because I've heard.
So weren't you familiar with his film work in Mrs. Doubtfire, Independence Day, or Mulan?
No, I still have never seen Mrs. Doubtfire, actually. I hadn't even know. I've seen clips of him in it since then. I haven't seen the whole movie. And I mean, I had seen Mulan many times growing up, but I just didn't know. I didn't bother looking up who was the voice of Yao.
Well, although you could still tell it's him. Well, although he still had that voice.
I didn't. No, when I was seeing him, I never thought to myself, why is that voice so familiar? Because it wasn't to me. I hadn't seen Mulan in such a long time that I had forgotten what some of the voices had sounded like, except for like the main cast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and yeah. And what about Independence Day?
I don't think I had seen Independence Day at that particular time. I ended up watching it for the first time a little bit later.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't a fan of that movie, but he just still had this memorable part saying, I gotta call my brother, I gotta call my housekeeper, I gotta call my lawyer. Oh, forget my lawyer.
I actually like the first Independence Day. I think it's a lot of fun, especially with Will Smith. Welcome to Earth. He's like, man, I'm supposed to be getting married this weekend, when he's having to drag the alien's body across the desert.
And of course, Bill Pullman has that line saying, today is our Independence Day.
Well, actually, the best line is Randy Quaid's, hello, boys, I'm back.
Well, I didn't say it was the best line. I was just recalling his. Well, in any case, we've gone over our discussion on our Tony predictions, so I guess for those watching, best of luck, or in this case, break a leg to you on your predictions, and hopefully we'll do the best we can tomorrow night. Bye.
Bye.